Hey guys, it's Julio Ricardo Varela, host of Latino Rebels Radio Live. It is Friday, June 12th. I'm just recording a simple introduction to the highlight clips that we will be presenting of the last couple of shows, so that you might have missed on Facebook. So if you missed any of the Facebook shows and want to know what Latino Rebels Radio Live is all about, just watch these clips. You'll see. There were some fantastic guests, and just big thanks to director Andrew Vasquez and our correspondent and Thursday co-host Melina Bobadilla. So enjoy these clips, guys.
How are you, Maria? Thank you for being on my birthday.
Happy birthday!
All right. First of all, before we get into this, let's just get a single shot again of that backdrop, because you are in your Harlem apartment. Your husband is an amazing artist, and there's beautiful little light on the side. I mean, like, you created your own backdrop here, Maria.
Let's see, where is it? It's over here, right?
It's the other way. No, it's
we have artwork everywhere. This is, in fact, my bedroom. And so there's just art everywhere. There's art on the ceilings. There's art on all of the walls. So this is my life.
We didn't have a moment to really connect about what really happened the last couple of days. And I saw some of your tweets about people power and how people came out with the violence, and like, how can you begin to look at the context of this, Maria, right now in this moment of history?
It's it's life-changing. And I mean that in the sense that, wow, like what we just lived through since March until now. And not ending, but culminating to a certain degree with this massive uprising. And Julio, I always talk about my husband because I am more of I get very worried. I get very sad. I was very worried about loss of life during the demonstrations, and that protesters would be killed by the police. And then, of course, I'd wake up and my husband would just be like, "It's a great day." And I'm like, But the looting, we haven't had looting in New York City since 1977, because it's true. And we can talk about that. And just Herman just kind of looking and saying, yeah, but look at what's happening. La gente está despierta. And so then that really helps me to just see it as also the other side of it, which really was. And then you saw that tweet where I was like, just because there was tear gas and violence didn't mean that fewer people were going to come out. It meant that more people were going to come out. And so now I feel like I've lived through something extraordinary.
In your time in Harlem, do you ever recall a moment? Because this is where I think it's important to start beginning to unpack sort of the movement and not just look at this as like the last 2 weeks. But has there ever been a time when you were in Harlem where you're like, wow, I've never seen anything like this, or this reminds me of that time, or whatever?
The first image that came to mind actually is one that I hadn't thought about for a while. But when I was thinking about the masses of people who just spontaneously were protesting right out here after the curfew, completely nonviolently, just really joyous. And then you asked me that question, and my mind went to the year that Nelson Mandela came to New York City. Mm. And 125th Street, which is, where Futuro Media is based. But right there on 125 and Adam Clayton Powell, I was actually on top of a bus stop. Mm. And it was masses of people. And Nelson Mandela was there. And he said, you know what I need? Actually, we need help. We need money. The ANC needs money. Will you help us? Óyeme, Julio, I was on top of the bus stop, so I was on top of all of the crowds. Yeah. And people started passing money like this over from one to another to pass the money to the front. And I was witnessing this in Harlem in the 1990s when it was, there was a lot of economic insecurity. That kind of moment of just like, trust and love of the people. So I would say that, and then I would say the downside, the sadder parts where I was very sad when I would go to sleep, when I was worried about the violence, reminded me of covering, the outbreak of violence around injustice in Crown Heights.
But when you see the trajectory, even growing up in Chicago, when I think about 1968, and I hear your Chicago story, and I think about the last 51 years, I'm getting a little bit retrospective tonight because I'm like, wow.
Because you need tequila.
Yeah, I'm drinking a little tequila, but at the same time, I'm like, I was born in a time of violence, and here I am in this uprising, and there's bookends. My life right now is bookends. So
I feel like we have lived through something that has transformed people's lives, the shaking to the core. And it's been really scary and sad, as you know, Julio, because we've been in the epicenter. So it's been really scary and sad. But at the same time, I feel like nothing is the same anymore. Nothing is the same anymore. And that's okay.
But listen, before you go, right? Before you go, I wanted to surprise you because our correspondent, Melina Bobadilla, who is in Orange is the New Black, who came to us and said, hey, I want to do something. I really love the live show. I want to kind of stretch my wings. And she usually does Tuesday. She usually does the Wednesday show. And then we're going to do a show with Amanda on Thursday. But she was like, I need to ask Maria a question. So Melina.
First of all, best name ever, Bobadilla.
Yeah, Melina, and then, it's, Camilo Sesto. Camilo Sesto, that's how. So Melina, you were like, I want to ask Maria a question.
Oh my God, this is so cool. Oh my God. Are the three of us on
take it away.
Are we here? Can
Yeah, you're good. You're on.
Okay,
and told us you're on. So here
I am.
Bring it home.
But I wanted to see if you would be interested in singing a little bit of a mañanitas for Julio, because I know that my fellow Mexicana knows these words.
Well, wait a second. Did you already talk to Julio about this?
No, I swear to God. I swear to God.
Me and Andy.
And I want to put it on record. Maria and Raul and Walter, the dog, already sang Las Mañanitas to me. So
there's Walter, by the way, right there. That little brother.
So I'm going to be completely honest here. Melina just wanted to be on for the last couple of minutes. I'm like, yeah, come on, surprise Maria, because I think it would be a nice little treat.
But the fact that you would say that, es que lo que tú no sabes is that is the thing that in my family we do
all the time
for the people that we love.
Yeah.
If it's their birthday, I'm singing. So let's go. Sale?
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Estas son las mañanitas que cantaba el rey David. A los muchachos bonitos se las cantamos así. Despierta, mi bien, despierta. Mira que ya amaneció. Ya los pajaritos cantan, la luna ya se metió.
Alabim bomba. You are a journalist, you're a writer. We call you doctor because you're a PhD, you're an educator, and now you are also a television writer. So tell us a little bit about the work that you do and how that led to you now working as a writer on the Hulu show Rami.
Wow, you did say you were going to give me a pretty powerful intro, and you showed out. Thank you, Melina. Melina and I have known each other for a while. Actually, we were having a similar sort of awakening that a lot of people are probably experiencing now together. And so it's revolutionary, this moment. For a lot of us that have worked for decades around abolition, and that's really my entry point into organizing, we couldn't have imagined the Minneapolis Police Department being disbanded. We couldn't imagine talking about defunding the police. We couldn't have imagined having conversations around anti-Blackness in non-Black people of color spaces, and we're doing it. People have been trying to do that work, but it's much more elevated in mass culture, in popular culture. So I came into this work doing prison abolition. I worked in Rikers Island for a couple of years with incarcerated youth and saw how it was Black and brown kids from the Bronx to Brooklyn who were being streamlined in and into a system. And that was a deep awakening for me. And from there, that motivated my PhD work, my work within the Muslim community around anti-racism, and also the Arab community. But at the same time, I was always delivered, thankfully, through my mentors, these radical politics, these rebel politics of what it means to stand up for our collective freedom. And so I thought going into a PhD program, I would learn the lessons to bring back to my community, but that's a whole nother story. A place that needs a Time's Up, that needs a Me Too movement, that needs a lot of reckoning. And then I just was trying to think about how to do the organizing work and how to do the work within community at the same time and be effective. So somehow, some way, I guess we'll go into a little bit more detail. I wrote a report about 100 years of Muslims being represented on TV and film. And then that funneled me into the Rami Writers Room. And here I am having conversations with Rami about getting on Seth Meyers with Patrisse Cullors to talk about defund the police and getting all the actors to sign an Arabs for Black Lives collective statement on the show. So all these pieces are moving together, and they might have felt disparate for a long period of time, but they're coming together.
We need this type of complexity when we have shows and narratives about communities of color, about immigrant communities. Oftentimes I feel like because we are starved for representation, there's this need this desire, this demand, this public outcry to get things like perfect, or to only like represent our community in the most positive model immigrant light.
I think by and large, a lot of people see themselves in the show. They see themselves in the character of Dina. They see their mother in the character of Mesa, or they see their father in the character of Farouk. Some people might not want to see themselves in Rami, especially this season with what happens. But yeah, what is happening with people who have pushback is that they actually are internalizing a post 9/11 framework called the bad Muslim, the good Muslim. And the ones who desperately want the good Muslim to be paraded all over television, the little mosque on the prairie, which was kind of a hit in Canada, but was a very prudish look into the good Muslim. And so this is messy. And the show is going to air out the dirty laundry, but it's going to do so from our power position. And I think that's what's important about the way that we tell this story, is that it's written by Arab Muslims, Muslims in general. It's performed by them. These actors, some of them do not have a shot to be able to play who they are ever in Hollywood. Mahershala, I think that's the first time he got to play a Muslim, and he gets to play a Muslim, a sheikh. And then similarly, because we introduce Black American Muslim characters, which was what we wanted to do initially in the first season, but there were not Black Muslim writers. So we shifted the room to represent that. And then we were able to show you what it looks like when the families meet, which is, I know folks who are Arab, and then they bring in their Black partner, and then they go through a very similar situation. So when each line is very specific and direct. So when they talk about, backing up a little bit, when Uncle Nassim says, "Where did you get your Islam? Was it in prison?" He's replicating a racist stereotype that Black Muslims are only converted in prison, but also there's nothing wrong with that either. Like, there are a lot of folks that convert in prison. They're having a moment of reflection and they're given a spiritual outlet. But then he responds with, well, I want to, your people are the ones that are opening up liquor stores in my neighborhood. And he's talking about Arab-owned corner stores in predominantly Black working class neighborhoods. And that's a huge problem. You saw that with what happened with George Floyd. Although the owner, an Arab Muslim guy in Minneapolis, was deeply rooted, invested, he didn't have policies to not call the police. He didn't have policies around de-escalation and not relying on law enforcement for a $20 counterfeit bill. Although he didn't call, somebody else did, that still doesn't absolve him from thinking about how you could create cultural contracts that, if you are really invested in the community, you would implement, or you would have implemented. So it's we just wanted to show the reality of the community, which there is tons of anti-Black racism. There's tons of internalization of white supremacy.
I don't need to like adapt this for the Latinx community. The Latinx community can very easily read this and figure out how it applies to us.
And so, Amanda, you've been with Futuro for 2 years, but you have this sort of like, you've been talking about anti-Blackness. You've been talking about vidas negras importan, the Black Lives Matter, since I've been following you. And I've been following you, we've been working for 2.5 years. I've been following you like 4, 5, 6 years before. Can you really begin to sort of contextualize the moment right now in the work that you've done and also seeing what you've seen?
It's been a little crazy. So I've talked to other Afro-Latinas and other Black Latinas and Black women in media, and what we're saying is that we have been having these conversations for years, and we have been hoping that people listen, hoping that people catch on, hoping that people pay attention, and now everyone is paying attention and reaching out to us to have very one-on-one conversations that we already had.
Exactly.
So it's kind of been both like encouraging, right, to see these marches and to see the message Las Vidas Negras Importan become huge, but it's also been overwhelming, and it's been a little exhausting. It's been emotionally exhausting, to be honest. Like Julio knows, I asked for yesterday off because I was like, I need to sleep.
Yeah.
So it's been a lot, but I do feel like this moment is different because of how it's caught on. I also think that, I'm not gonna lie, I think that the things that are quote unquote seen as like violent, like the toppling of all of these statues, that to me signifies a new era.
Talk to me about the Dominican community now in the moment and what people are saying.
There was a protest in the Bronx, and a lot of local businesses were they were looted, right? Like people broke glasses, and there's talk that there might have been infiltrators or out of towners, that these weren't even people from the Bronx who did this.
Right.
And then people had a well-meaning protest in the Heights that was Black Lives Matter, but also we're going to protect our small businesses, and there was a lot of like pride, like we don't do it that way in Washington Heights, da-da-da. And during the day, it was one thing. When the night came, it became something different, where this video went viral of a group of Dominicans chasing down a group of young men who appeared to be African American, right? Like from the video, you kind of get that context. And it went viral. Dominicans was like trending the next morning, and it was a moment of reckoning. And it's very interesting because in the past, when things like this happen, like let's say an image goes viral of something like Sammy Sosa, right? A lot of us are like, okay, not all Dominicans are like that. There's actually a movement to reclaim Blackness in the Dominican community. There's a growing Afro-affirming movement on the island and in the diaspora.
There's a kind of a subset of folks that have been very vocal about issues of race and expanding this idea of Latinidad, and some have been talking about like, shit, maybe we need to cancel Latinidad because it is inherently it builds on anti-Blackness and anti-indigeneity and rooted in this like nationalistic kind of like whitewashing. Right. And one of the ways that happens is through popular culture and through music. And so in this moment of, as you said, reckoning, right? It's this awakening where it's no longer a choice to pretend this doesn't exist, to say like, I don't like to get political, eso no es mi asunto, eso no es mi causa. That's not a choice anymore. So you have these artists like San Benito, like J Balvin. I don't even want to like Karen G. People that are in reggaeton, in dembow, music that has been considered urbano, but without a doubt, without any argument, absolutely is rooted in an Afro-diasporic sense.
Well, first of all, I want to say I think it's hilarious you called her Karen G instead of Carol G.
Oh, Carol.
It's this.
No,
I'm just
Freudian
saying.
slip.
That was a little.
Said she's the Karen. She just went
That's
Karen
it.
on you.
Calling her Karen G now. That's it.
Let's do it.
I mean, it's a lot of the same. but it is still disappointing, you know. So these are a lot of, I think over the past couple of years, we've seen the sort of whitewashing of reggaeton, you know, where it's music that is very black, with black roots that came from black people, and now most of the artists are white or white passing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these artists, this is their moment to be like, hey, Black Lives Matter. That's it. That's all you have to say. Like, it's that simple.
I'm with you. Just say it. That's where I'm kind of like.
You don't have to do, you know, the whole blackout thing. You don't have to do all that. You don't have to write like a whole essay. Just say Black Lives Matter, or, you know.
Andy, if you could cue up the tweet where he gets kind of defensive. He was having like a white tears moment with this tweet, where he's like, ¿Por qué me están atacando si no me enseñan? Like, well, how can you attack me first if you haven't even taught me? Like,
yeah, it felt like, again, the whole white tears thing that you just mentioned, you know. And if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything. Our parents teach us that, like, you know. And I feel like it was a moment where he was recentering himself and making himself the victim, instead of just listening, you know, like,
right.
You are light skinned and you enjoy light skin privilege. So it's time to pass the mic maybe to someone who is dark skinned and someone who has the knowledge but hasn't been given the opportunity because of colorism, right? So we're in a moment of pass the mic, and he was not doing that.
I do like the theory of Bad Bunny going, I'm going to go away for 2-3 weeks and I'm going to produce like something.
Right.
That's a possibility.
That's why I said it's a best case scenario. Like, maybe he's doing that and he's going to shock us all.
I feel it. Over here as like a West Coast Chicana, I stand the man. Like, yo lo quiero mucho. I want to be proven wrong too. And so, but what's interesting
is
that
this shows if you are silent, you still have the power. If all these other artists had been silent for a little bit and listened, they would have just said Black Lives Matter. They would have known that was enough.
Right. That's right.
It's what you're saying. Like, I don't think people are ready to, in the Latino music industry, to recognize the racism within the Latino music industry.
Yeah.
You know? It's an issue, and it's unfortunate because music really represents a culture. It's unfortunate because now is when reggaeton specifically, right, and movimiento music, now is when it's really
there you go.
Now is when it's really popped off into the world.
Yeah.
And it doesn't represent its roots.
Thinking about, you know, Remezcla said they no longer want to use urbano as a you know, when they're describing the music. We were actually talking about it today because I was like, oh, I don't know about the history, but you explained the history of it. And once you explained it to me, then I was like, oh, now I get it. So can you just explain briefly, like, why you think, because you, at least when we had the editorial meeting, you were like, I think this is a good decision, right? So why did you think it was a good decision?
I mean, the Grammys also announced that they got rid of the urban category, and now they're naming it, I wrote it down, progressive R&B, right? So,
oh man, you just came friggin' prepared, journalist.
This wasn't sort of in a vacuum. This felt like it's you know, all kinds of music coming from this hemisphere of the world. And you know, the term urban is very charged. Normally it means black, and it's when people want to say black and brown without saying it. You know, it's a very coded word. So
euphemism.
Exactly. Yeah. And this term movimiento actually came from the Dominican radio program Alofoque. The host and the people in that program started using it in movimiento urbano, and now they just got rid of the urbano part. And I know some of the people who were involved in that decision, and there were two badass Afro-Latinas involved, Gata, you know, Kathleen Eccleston, and Jennifer Mota Valdez. They were both involved in the decision and in the statement, and you know, they're the homies. So it's well intentioned, and I think it's also a moment to think critically about these terms, you know, in the same way we think about the statues, right? These things are not okay anymore.
Guess what? if you go to our playlist right now on Facebook, there's countless of these videos that you can watch and catch up. And we will be back on Tuesday. Tuesday we will have another guest, another show. And Tuesday, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard, 7 p.m. Pacific. Where you got to be, on the Facebook, or we might share it on other social media networks as well. So thanks a lot, guys, for all your support, and have a great weekend. And we'll see you on Tuesday night. Bye.